Live from Barcelona, Spain, it's theCUBE, covering Cisco Live Europe. Brought to you by Cisco and its ecosystem partners.
Hello everyone, welcome back to theCUBE's live coverage, day 2 of 3 days of wall-to-wall coverage here in Europe, in Barcelona, Spain for Cisco Live 2019. I'm John Furrier with Dave Vellante, Stu Miniman, hosting a great load of interviews this week here for Cisco Live. Guys, kicking off day 2, day 1 was all the big announcements, Cisco putting in all the announcements, really setting in and the messaging coming together, the product portfolios filling out. Clearly Cisco is adopting a path to the cloud, taking their data center business, securing that, bringing that data center into the cloud, kind of hybrid, multi-cloud. Big message around multi-cloud, and then under the hood, data center. Traffic patterns are changing. It's not a rip and replace, it's an extension to the environment. Cisco's intent-based networking, plus cloud center management. A lot of stuff, we discussed that yesterday. But I want to get your take. Is Cisco's positioning viable? And what does it mean vis-a-vis the competition? Because Cisco is a blue chip tech player, certainly have zillions of customers, very relevant. This is a huge impact, how they're positioning themselves, Stu.
Yeah, so John, you remember a few years ago we were saying hyperclouds are going to, the hyperscale clouds, the public cloud providers are going to take over the world, and boy, Cisco's in trouble. Because if a third or half of the market all of a sudden evaporates from them, those enterprise buyers of switches and routers and everything else like that, Cisco is doomed. Well, you know, we listened to the keynote yesterday and Cisco's talking about all of their solutions anywhere. And when you go through the ecosystem of public cloud, hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, say, does Cisco have a play there? And the answer is absolutely. You know, it's not just the, you know, AppD acquisition, which has software in AWS, but you know, SD-WAN is going to be a critical component to get from my data centers to the public clouds, and Cisco has software and solutions and consulting to help customers in all of these environments. So we always know that there's partnerships and there's competition. There's a lot of players out there, but you know, it was good to see them, you know, talking, you know, a lot about what they're doing with Kubernetes with Amazon, because you can't talk about cloud, either public cloud or multi-cloud, without first talking about Amazon. Last year, we were a little critical, John, and said, okay, Google's great, but Google's number 3 or 4. So you've got to be there with Amazon, got to be there with Microsoft, and service providers. We've already interviewed a couple of service providers, always been a strength for Cisco to be in there, and so, you know, good positioning. You know, we talked yesterday a bunch about the bridge to possible and where to go, but the more I think about that, anywhere is what Cisco's branded everything, and that's when you talk multi-cloud. Multi-cloud's really a whole bunch of clouds and a whole bunch of things, and therefore, I need a player that's going to help give me coverage in all of these environments, and Cisco's making a strong case to be there.
And Dave, so, I mean, Stu's right. A couple of years ago, we were critical of Cisco, and I think rightfully so. I think the whole industry looked at them as not in the middle of the fairway. And certainly the recovery shot for Cisco is really strong because a lot's changed. Go back a few years, they didn't have a good ecosystem for developers. They didn't have a good open source position. They kind of were, you know, do I go up the stack or not? But they had the core networking. So a lot of people were saying, hey, if Cisco doesn't make a move, they're doomed. You know, we were one of them. So a lot's changed. You're seeing the adoption of microservices, containers, APIs, the growth of DevNet that Susie Wee has initiated is clear proof, in my opinion. Then you've got the data center guys saying, hey, we can take networking and take this and enable cloud. So Cisco making good moves, put themselves in pole position for growth.
Well, I think the first point is, if you roll back 10 years ago, not just Cisco we were critical of, it was clear to us that cloud was going to be where all the growth was. And if you didn't have a public cloud, you were going to be in trouble unless you developed a cloud strategy. So certainly Cisco, Dell EMC, now you know Dell EMC, VMware, none of them really owned a public cloud strategy, and 5 years ago they had to figure it out. Well, they figured out that actually managing multi-clouds is a great opportunity. And so Cisco's got a viable strategy. Networks between clouds are going to flatten. They're going to need management. And specifically as it relates to Cisco and maybe their competition, they have to position themselves as our multi-cloud management system is higher performance and more secure than the competition. That's what they have to sell their customers on. And the second piece of that is they got to transition from selling ports to selling software. And they're making that transition. So I like their strategy. By the way, I also like VMware's strategy. They capitulated to AWS, and now they're tight with AWS. IBM went out and paid $2 billion for SoftLayer. So they've got, a cloud strategy. Oracle's got a cloud strategy. Microsoft's got a great cloud strategy. So if you go through and tick off...
hold on, they have clouds. So I mean, let's just understand something. There's clouds and then cloud strategies, right?
Yeah,
so
Amazon... The $34 billion that IBM's paying for Red Hat is giving them a multi-cloud strategy more than just saying we have a bunch of data centers and bare metal.
But so they play in both, right?
Yeah.
And maybe not so much in the public cloud, right? I would argue that their public cloud has failed to meet their expectations.
Who's
that's
public
why
cloud?
IBM. And that's why they had to pay $34 billion for Red Hat. I would say just the opposite about Microsoft. Their public cloud strategy has been an enormous success, and they're very well positioned for multi-cloud.
Okay, so let's just put it on the table. So Cisco looks at the public cloud as partners, not competitors. So Amazon, Azure, Google aren't competing with Cisco, are they? Or are they partnering? Understanding competition is all about understanding who has a cloud. So I would say Cisco's strategy to partner, just like SAP did, just like everyone else, and Dell did, that's the competitive, not cloud. So, or maybe, this is the question, are the public clouds competitive to Cisco?
They're frenemies, John.
No, the answer is yes. There's no question about it. They're growing at 20, 30, 40% a year. Cisco and IBM, HP, they're growing at, much lower, right?
So
single digits.
Right. So, John, we know if Amazon, if there is a profitable space that they can offer a competitive service, they will. Security, you said. Cisco's got a great position in security, both what they've had for a long time, and they've done acquisitions like Duo more recently. And, we've seen lots of pieces of the public cloud ecosystem that Cisco's bought over the last few years. Clicker was one we've spent some time talking about. But absolutely, Amazon goes after some of those pieces. So they're going to partner. Cisco's got, last I checked, at least 3 dozen products in the AWS marketplace. But, they can live there, but there will be competition. So
Cisco's got some huge assets in this game. They got 800,000 plus customers. They, are 60% of the networking market, so they own the install base. It's really the only market that you can think of that's a major market where the dominant player still owns, 60% of the market. And they've never been
Cisco
able
for networking and VMware for the hypervisor are very similar in that case, and both now have a similar strategy as to how they're going.
Well, that's the most interesting competitive dynamic in my view is VMware and its acquisition of Nicira and obviously Cisco. And Cisco's not going to take this lying down. They've got ACI and they claim number one. They didn't say whose data that was. I was squinting for, is that IDC, Gartner, Forrester? But,
Well, let's talk about growth because how I always complain about market researchers aren't on the mark in terms of the reality of where the market is. So you mentioned growth. So if we're early on cloud growth, and that's where the growth is, what is the cloud adoption going to look like over the next 10 to 20 years? Is it going to look more like public cloud, or is it going to look more like on-premises evolving to cloud operations? And if the growth of cloud operations is all things wide area network, you mentioned SD-WAN, then there's more growth coming. So if that's the case, is Cisco going to be able to capture that growth for the future?
Well, in terms of growth, I think AWS is on its way to being a $100 billion revenue company. And that's pretty impressive given where they are today. They're going to triple in revenue. So that's where the growth is. So now, Cisco's already participating in a huge TAM. What they've got to do is hold on to that business and identify new opportunities where they can manage multi-cloud instances and compete effectively with VMware, who's coming at it from the hypervisor, and now, as I said yesterday, trying to do to networks and storage what it did for systems. And then IBM Red Hat coming at it really from the applications perspective and with the services view. Microsoft with a foot in both camps. You got Oracle in its little niche. It's just a really interesting.
Well, you got an installed base that's moving to the cloud. You got net new companies that are going to be started, might have on-premise or go full cloud. This is the question that everyone's going to ask. I think Cisco can take their existing base with moving packets from point A to point B and storing and making data more intelligent. Moving data around is a big networking phenomenon.
Here's the question. Andy Jassy would say, we believe there are going to be far fewer data centers in the future, that most data is going to live in the public cloud. The likes of Michael Dell, Charlie Robbins, et cetera, I think they see the world as a hybrid world, right? That there's going to be more data that's in a hybrid, on-prem plus cloud than is going to be in the public cloud.
I love Andy Jassy, but I'll just say, first of all, I understand his bias and his perspective, and I think he's right at one level. Why wouldn't Amazon see people moving data centers to the cloud? I get that. I say that it's going to be in the networks. That's where the action will be. Where are the networks? Are the networks in the cloud? Are the networks on-premise? Are the networks on a phone, IoT? So if you see IoT and edge coming together, if it's all one network,
yeah, I mean,
then you're going to have the value is going to be in the network, not necessarily the clouds per se, or it's shared value.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about edge computing and IoT. Cisco's got Meraki, which is growing strong. SD-WAN is a critical component for this multi-cloud piece. They are really posed to, drive this next generation of 5G. Not something we've dug into a lot yet, but it is finally coming, really soon here. And Cisco has a lot of those pieces to be able to hit the next
It always
wave.
goes back to the data, in my opinion. And the leverage points for data are SaaS. So if you own the applications business or you're doing well there, you're in a good position. All the data is running over Cisco networks. So that puts them in a really good position.
Yep.
And as we know, the likes of AWS and Microsoft, Alibaba, et cetera, they're trying to get as much data into their clouds as possible.
And what I loved yesterday in the keynote is data was actually one of the central components that they talked about, which the Cisco I know of 10 or 20 years ago, was just bits that ran over our pipes. So they understand the value of data and they're driving to that market.
Well, we've been saying on theCUBE now for 9 years, data is at the center of the value proposition. Data at the center, data center value proposition. This is actually happening. It's really going to, we see a lot of growth in cloud. Dave, good commentary. Stu, well done. We're going to have Sachin Gupta, one of the main, all the leaders coming on theCUBE here from Cisco to break down, and we're going to ask them the tough questions. Stay with us for day 2 coverage here on theCUBE. Live in Barcelona, I'm John Furrier, Stu Miniman and Dave Vellante, breaking down all the action. We'll be right back with more after this short break.